My name is Mark Tully, and my mother was born in Bangladesh, I have to say that, in Akara. And I have a long connection with this part of the world. My mother's family were British in India for many generations. At the time of the Liberation War, I was the BBC's chief commentator on South Asia for the BBC World Service. And BBC World Service in those days was very influential in this part of the world because we were broadcasting independent news, and both in East Pakistan as it was then and in India, the only alternative or rival to us were government channels, and of course many people wanted to hear independent news rather than hearing news from government channels. In the first party of journalists who were allowed to come here and travel freely by the Pakistan Army, I think it must have been April or May, it was after the Pakistan Army had established control, or they thought they'd established control, over the whole country, because the country had got out of control after the original assault by the Pakistan Army. And it was not an official delegation. We were independent journalists, a group of us allowed to come, and we could travel widely and meet people, see the damage which had been done. Although, of course, we were watched pretty carefully by the Pakistan Army. Everywhere we went, we were told stories of the brutality of the attacks that had been by the Pakistan Army. Interestingly, driving down the road, especially, I remember this especially after we'd gone that crossing at Aricha Ghat, and when we got to the other side, I remember especially there, all the way along the road from there onwards, on both sides of the road, you saw villages which were completely burnt out. And it was obvious that what the Pakistan Army had done was to advance down that road, burning everything that they saw, basically, in order to guarantee that they could get safely down the road and get as far as Rajshah. They tried particularly to discredit the reports. They were, allowing us to travel freely was part of their campaign, but it backfired because we reported on all the damage which had been done and everything. So they had a campaign which was partly aimed at getting their side of the story across and partly aimed at discrediting the reports of the Western journalists. I was horrified by the reports which came out on that first night, after the first night reports put out by my friend Simon Dring and others who'd stayed on. And from that moment onwards, one felt within oneself an anger and the sense that something outrageous was happening and had happened. What, of course, did develop gradually was the sense that in the end the Liberation War was going to be successful, and that somehow or other there was no way that Pakistan could stay in this part of the world. That was the thing which developed more gradually, because in the first stages one was struck by the power of the Pakistan Army, the size of it, its weaponry and all the rest of it, and its determination and brutality. And so one felt that it was going to be very difficult to resist this. But then gradually you became aware that yes, things were going very badly for the Pakistan Army, and that the liberation struggle would be successful, would probably be successful. Once India started to once it became clear, I mean, India didn't make it clear, but it did become clear that India was helping and training the Mukti Bahini and that sort of thing, one realized that the whole thing had been notched up and that the chances of the Mukti Bahini were far greater. But then one anticipated that maybe it could go on for quite a long, long time, you see, because even then the Indian Army was not doing the actual fighting. The Mukti Bahini were doing the fighting, and they were still pretty disorganized in some ways. I mean, they weren't an organized proper army or anything like that. And, one had memories of how long the troubles had gone on in Vietnam and that sort of thing. And one thought that, yes, it will be it's going to be very difficult for what seemed to be utterly impossible was that there could be a reconciliation between West Pakistan and East Pakistan. And so one thought that in the end, Pakistan army would have to give up somehow or other. But one didn't realize how quickly it was all going to happen. And of course, although one says how quickly, 9 months or something like that, it didn't seem quick at the time. It seemed to be going on and on and on. We used to have these briefings from General Rao Farman Ali and we'd ask him questions and tell him what we had seen and that sort of thing. And he was a very suave and smooth gentleman and tried to persuade us that we were not. And there was a wonderful correspondent who's still alive called Claire Hollingworth. She's over 100 now, and she was a great military expert. And I remember these briefings used to turn into sort of military conversations between Rao Farman Ali and Claire Hollingworth about the strategy an army should use under the present circumstances. And we used to get a bit fed up with listening to these conversations. I can remember being arrested when I came to Dhaka. I was filming in an area, a Hindu area, where there had been a lot of damage done, and a policeman, Punjabi policeman, because you remember a lot of policemen had been sent over from Punjab, came along and said, well, what are you doing? And I could speak some Urdu to him, so I said to him, I'm here as a journalist, and I've been told I'm allowed to shoot film or take photographs, report, whatever. He said, no, you're not. He said, I haven't heard anything about this. This is nonsense. So he took me, put me in a police van and took me to the police station. And there it was quite entertaining because there was a little, quite small Bengali officer and this huge, great Punjabi police officer. And the Punjabi police officer started shouting at the Bengali officer, saying, "Ye to badmash hai, this is a bad man, he's come here, I caught him filming, he'll take his camera off him, lock him up and everything." And then the Bengali man, quite calmly, he turned to me and said, "Well, who are you?" So I said, "I'm Mark Tully, BBC," and I produced my press card and all the rest of it. And I said that we have been told that we can come here and we can do anything we want. And all I was doing was taking films in the Bengali in the Hindu area there. And the man looked at me and he said, "I think I've seen something about this." And he got out some book, sort of gazette type thing, looked down it, and there it was in there. So then he rounded on the Punjabi police officer and abused him and said that you people, you come here, you can't speak our language, you don't understand anything, you don't even know what is happening. How dare you arrest this innocent man? Of course he is allowed to be here, and told me to go. And I thought it was very courageous of the Bengali police officer to abuse the Punjabi officer in the way that he did. So that memory always sticks in my mind. When I was first written to by the Bangladesh government, I said I didn't want to have the honour personally. I thought that I made 2 points. I said that, number one, I was only one person in the BBC, and it was a historical accident that I became the best known person. And number two, that I did not want to give the impression that we had taken sides during the war, that we had in any way forgotten our duty to be impartial journalists and impartial providers of information. And then in the end I was persuaded to come here, but every time I have been asked, I have said that it's wrong to consider that we were supporters of the liberation movement. We were providing information. As human beings, our feelings may have been different. But I thought in the end it would be rather pompous and discourteous to stand on my dignity or some nonsense like that and say, no, I refuse to accept this honour. And of course it is a great honour, and I see it as an honour for the BBC for having done their duty. That's the way I would like to see the honour myself.